Welcome to Troublemakers Smoke Signals. This time I'd like to chat briefly with you all about an article that I wrote just before the COVID pandemic. It's called "Is the Rising Obsession with Digital Security Paralyzing People Power?" And whatever I was thinking about during the time when I wrote this article, five different organizations had invited me to attend digital security trainings or help facilitate them within a span of just like a few months. Whatever I was thinking about at that time has kind of resurfaced with the acceleration of AI and the more proliferated, conversation around um, state espionage and the private sector and techno-feudalism and billionaires weaponizing the internet against us. I do remember, as a child of the 90s, a time when the internet was so much more cool. It felt more more democratic. It more belonged to us. It felt like the commons. You could find forums of where people are talking, every minute about the niche, weird, subcultural things you might be interested in. You could find your tribe, and you could kind of like build community with people that you didn't know. Um, and these days, even though we have something that's called social media, we feel even more detached than, at least I feel more detached than I did at that time, whenever I'm using the internet. So I just use it much less, actually. It's kind of strange. Um, there's this conversation circulating these days on digital security. It's really come back to the fore, and it makes sense why. People are worried about people who are monetizing our existence, encroaching on our privacy, people who are using digital espionage to disrupt our organizing and our movement life. It's reasonable that we have these concerns, but I still maintain that often we're putting our center of gravity in the wrong place. We feel like we need to cross every T and dot every I before we take a step to move forward, and often we forget a lot of the historical principles about building security culture within our movements. And we think that we're just playing a whole new ball game, but in reality, like, a lot of the principles are still the same. And one of those key principles is decentralization. If you build a movement around individuals as leaders, it's very easy for your opponents to get information about them or exact some kind of repression against them, and then as soon as that happens, your movement is in shambles. It's much harder for them to collect data and information and intel from so many people. So we won't talk about it on this episode, but there are many ways to organize more horizontally in more dispersed and decentralized kinds of ways. And that's kind of like one of the main principles of ensuring that you have a more secure movement than otherwise. And another key aspect here is to also be mindful that a lot of threats to our safety and security as members of social movements has to do with kind of like offline espionage. People trailing you, co-optation, deep state people being at your meetings and pretending to be somebody they're not, pretending to represent a community that they don't represent. I've sat in countless meetings where I and others in those meetings were keenly aware that we had spies in our presence. So one kind of conscious thing to do is to make the assumption that what you're doing with the group that you're with is information that's accessible to your opponents. But the kind of the bright side or the silver lining of that is that most spies are not like ideologically convicted to work for your opponent. Most people don't want to work for the oppressor, but maybe they get paid, maybe they make a living from it. They have some kind of personal self-interest in doing so. And as Sun Tzu in The Art of War kind of famously described with the ancient wisdom that he offered, there are many ways to deal with spies, and you can find, of course, this old book online for free in various places. If you'd like to read more about your tactical options for how to deal with spies. But more back to the point about digital security and this kind of like non-digital or offline kind of security threats. States these days are actually, yes, they are subcontracting, European or Israeli tech firms to do kind of like spying and data collection and all that kind of stuff against us. They are doing that, but they are also, and maybe in a more ongoing day-to-day kind of way, employing people, whether formally or informally, to collect information about us in our communities, geographically speaking. And often you end up with this kind of collective community knowledge that spying does happen, especially in more authoritarian contexts. And then you kind of have this incentive that is lingering in many communities where people feel like if they can be just a vigilante and bring some information maybe to the police, they might get some kind of payment for that. So we're seeing people willing to sell out their neighbors just for peanuts, just for less than a day's wage. And this is, in many places, more an existential threat than, say, the combing of information on Facebook Messenger. So it's not to say an either or, but it's more of a both and. We have to be considerate of all the threats against us. But that being said, I'll invoke the words of a comrade from Togo, a cleric actually, who's organized against the Faure regime in Togo. He said, "Risk will never be zero. You can't wait until risk is at zero and you've eliminated every possible risk to take an action and take a step forward." And I think if somebody's saying that against a family that's been in power for over half a century, the rest of us should probably heed that wisdom. And in all industries, like, people don't use the word risk elimination. They talk about risk management. They talk about risk mitigation, So you're not going to get that risk down to zero, but you can plan, what do we do in the event of X or Y? If I'm abducted today, what is going to be the response, from our comrades? Are we already organized to prepare for such an eventuality? If there's an arrest, if there's some kind of harassment or defamation campaign, or deepfakes with AI, what are we going to do? So we can actually organize working groups around these things. We have our options to prepare for some of the varied kinds of oppression that or repression that we might encounter. There's a lot of money. This is a very trending topic. There's a lot of money in the nonprofit sector going toward, resolving challenges regarding, digital security and this kind of thing. And workshops for 1 or 2 weeks long, being organized to train people about these things at expensive hotels. I'm not a fan of this. I think most of those things can be condensed into a one-page, PDF document or a graphic, of bullet points. Please download Signal. Don't do X. Please do Y. We'll link to some of these, suggestions in our episode description show notes. But I think often, if you can get an expert to hear about your situation and make a few pieces of advice, that's a great thing to do. But not all of us have access to that. And I think also there's this temptation that if we download Signal, we feel secure, because Signal is supposed to be an app that's for us, and well encrypted. If we're using Tor browser, we feel more secure. But these are not like the only kind of considerations. If you leave your house and for a week, you go on vacation for a week, a thief will enter your house through whatever window it was that you left open, right? So we all have a trail somehow and somewhere. And we can and should try to minimize that trail. We should try to exercise, better habits when we're online, etc. But if they want information, they will get it digitally or offline. We have to be kind of prepared for that eventuality. So when we talk about signal, for example, if we feel comfortable that we're using signal, we might be ignoring the fact that one of those people in our signal group has been co-opted, paid, to bring whatever's being discussed in that signal group to our opponents. So just because you downloaded Signal, just because you have this fancy CCTV at your house to monitor whatever happens there and capture it on video, doesn't necessarily mean that you are secure. What if like the CCTV falls into the wrong hands? What if that person in your Signal group is not to be trusted? So we can never arrive at 100% trust. We have to make this assumption that we do have spies in our midst. We do have people who wish us ill, or even if they don't wish us ill, they are willing to maybe be paid for the intel they bring to our oppressors. So these are aspects of our reality that are often put in parentheses or totally ignored when there are these like NGO programs around, digital security. So let's kind of like, let's try to be practical. Let's try to be wary. Let's try to invoke some of the historical movement wisdom about building security culture with comrades. Don't use sensitive names and places when you're using certain technology. Let's read more about this historically and not just try to think that this moment, because technology has developed, it's in a vacuum. Let's learn from history, both in terms of understanding how oppressors have weaponized technology against us, because that's got a deep history. You can read some of it in the beautiful Trouble Toolbox. Darya Alikhani wrote a great piece on practicing digital security that talks about, among other things, in New York City, it used to be policy that if you are a person of a certain hue, you have to carry a lantern with you at night to light up your face so that the people patrolling the streets can identify you. That's facial recognition, right? Just in a different time. This all feels very new, but the reality is actually quite entrenched in history. So let's be wary of all these things. We wish you the best of luck and much solidarity as you try to protect yourself as best you can, but we also want to encourage you. There will be slip-ups. There will be things you could have done better. Don't lose momentum just because you're feeling paralyzed or paranoid or anything like that about what information your opponents could have. I know firsthand what it feels like to be in that situation. My psychology at one point had really descended, into the abyss because of these kinds of thoughts. So that I come to you today in that spirit, wanting to encourage everybody out there who's fighting the good fight to continue to do so and not to let your worries paralyze you, even if there are some things that we can learn and do a little bit better. We will also have an email in the show notes that you can reach us at if you have any questions about best practices. We'll have the article that I mentioned at the front of this episode, and we'll have links to other comradely partner organizations where you can find technical expertise and different kinds of resources and links to this and that could be potentially helpful in terms of building security culture for yourself and for your groups, your comrades. Thank you so much for listening to this, and please share it with anybody that you feel needs to hear it.